Welcome to the wonderful world of noun clauses. I know that some of you are stressed out about the noun clauses, how to find them, how to diagram them, where to put everything. So I've put together a cheat sheet, and I also want to kind of walk you through the process and how it kind of works to hopefully help you feel more comfortable with what's going on. So a noun clause consists of a subject and a verb. It has to have those two things, and then it also often has other stuff following, but the minimum is the subject and verb. And keep in mind that it's taking the place, this entire phrase is taking the place of a simple noun in the sentence. So if you think back to your diagramming cheat sheet and your sentence pattern cheat sheet, every time you see an N or an S or a DO, those are all nouns, and they can be, those single units can be replaced by an entire phrase. Noun clauses are dependent clauses, which means they are incomplete sentences. They can't stand on its own. So they do have the subject and verb that are required for a complete sentence, but they don't express a complete thought. It has to be in tandem with another clause to make sense. Something that's helpful when you're identifying and diagramming noun clauses is to remember that they can be replaced by these simple nouns: it, something, and someone. And that helps kind of reduce the complexity, and you can figure out what's going on and then put the clause back in. So the first thing I do to find noun clauses is to look for these kind of red flags, these trigger words or phrases that introduce a noun clause, and those fall into two categories. The first one is interrogatives, and these are question words, and you'll recognize those from the interrogative pronouns that we've seen. These ones are part of the noun clause. They're part of the meaning of the sentence, and so you have to diagram them as part of the clause, depending on where they fit. And they fall into three categories: who, whoever, whom, whomever, what, and whatever are diagrammed as nouns, and they'll be either in the subject or the object place in your diagram. Which and whose are diagrammed as adjectives because they're clarifying which ones. They're modifying nouns. So these are adjectives, and they're going to be diagrammed under the noun they modify. And then the last one is when, where, why, and how. These answer those adverb questions, so they're diagrammed as adverbs under the verb they modify. So don't think about it as where in the sentence they fall, because that might lead you astray. Think about how they're functioning, if they're functioning as nouns, adjectives, or adverbs, and then put them in the appropriate location. The second trigger category or red flag category that you want to look for in identifying noun clauses are expletives. These don't really carry any weight in the sentence. They don't have meaning. They're just there to help things flow and sound nice. And so they're diagrammed above the verb, showing that they're kind of outside of the meaning with a dotted line. And we'll see examples of those being diagrammed. So these are if, that, whether, or not. So once you've kind of identified the noun clause, your task is to diagram it. And to do that, you need to figure out what part of speech the noun clause is functioning as. So keep in mind that noun clauses can replace any noun in the sentence. So now we'll talk about how they can function. The first and the most obvious one is as the subject. Subjects are always nouns, and so it's what's doing the action of the verb, what is linked to the verb. And this can be in any sentence pattern. So for example, whoever rang the doorbell has disappeared. We have this interrogative, and it's in our first category, so we know it's going to be diagrammed as a noun. And what I do is I circle the trigger word. I put parentheses around the noun clause, and then I parse the sentence and identify how things both in the noun clause and in the main part of the sentence are functioning. So whoever is diagrammed as a noun. We have the verb rang, direct object, doorbell. This whole thing is our noun clause functioning as the subject. So it goes on a pedestal in that subject slot of our diagram, and then we just finish diagramming the sentence. Keep in mind that with noun clauses, you have two sentence patterns to identify. We have the sentence pattern for the noun clause, and we have the sentence pattern for the larger sentence. Hopefully you're comfortable with identifying sentence patterns now. I'm not going to go into that, but I have marked that on your cheat sheet just to help clarify things. And even though we have a lot going on here, these fall into really simple categories. This whole noun clause is replacing this one S. So if you can kind of condense things down to their basic elements, figure out the sentence pattern, and then expand your vision again, it helps not to get so confused. The second part of speech that it can function as, noun clause can function as, is the subjective complement. And if you remember those, that's the noun that ends patterns, sentence patterns 3 and 5. So it's going to be at the end of the sentence, and it's referring back and clarifying the subject. So in this case, our subject is question, our verb is was. Here is our expletive, that trigger phrase. It doesn't carry any meaning, and then the rest of our noun clause. So I'm going to diagram my main sentence, subject, be verb, with the backslash, showing that a subjective complement is coming, and then I diagram my noun clause. We is the subject, should arrive is our verb, whether or not goes above, because it doesn't carry meaning, and then early is the adverb, modifying the verb. And it goes on the pedestal in that subjective complement place. And then you can associate the correct sentence patterns with that. Direct object, again, follows an action verb, and it functions largely the same way. And so, oops, and I neglected to diagram the if. That's one of those expletives. So it should be up above had arrived, the if on that dotted line. I'm going a little bit faster because I'm assuming you're starting to kind of see how this is working. If noun clauses can function as direct objects, they can also function as indirect objects. Keep in mind that it's associated with the prepositions to and for. They might not be explicitly written, they might just be implied, as in this example. So I'm going to find my trigger word, and that's the interrogative whoever. I identify my noun clause, and that's right in the middle of the sentence. So what I'm going to do is diagram the main sentence first. You should give a bonus. So that's subject, transitive verb, and direct object. And then the implied is a bonus to whoever sells the most. Whoever is one of those whose functions is the noun, so it goes in the noun slot here. Then we have our verb and our direct object. And that goes on that horizontal line below the diagram. The slanted line implies that there's the preposition to here, but we don't write it down because it's not written in the sentence. The next one is as an objective complement, and that's only going to be sentence pattern 10. That's when you have the noun at the end of the sentence clarifying the direct object. So in this case, we have what is our red flag word that shows us that we have a noun clause coming. So I identify my noun clause. I diagram my subject, verb, direct object. That as, again, has no meaning, so it goes up here. And then I diagram my noun clause. What is one of those words that functions as a noun. It goes in the noun slot. Then we have our verb, and we have our adjective. Noun clauses can also function as an object of a preposition. The preposition is not part of the noun clause, so don't make the mistake of including that. And we see that what is our trigger word, our red flag, and so we isolate our noun clause. The main part of the sentence, he is famous, and then we have our preposition for that's diagrammed on that slanted line. Remember, nouns always go in the horizontal, so I'm going to diagram this here. Here's a good example of where you don't want to just diagram the sentence as it comes. Our subject is he, drew is our verb, and what is answering the question what he drew. He drew what? So things are completely out of order. What is functioning as the direct object and needs to be placed there. So that makes that a pattern 7. The last part of speech that noun clause can function as is an appositive. We haven't really talked about this much yet in this course. It's a fancy name, but what it really means is you have a noun that's clarifying another noun, and they're right next to each other. They're usually offset by commas, which makes it easier to identify. And you can lift it out of the sentence without changing the meaning. You might not get as much detail, but the sentence is still a complete sentence. So in this case, you could say your decision is not very important. That makes absolute sense. I don't know what that decision is, but grammatically, it's a complete thought. So decision is our subject. Here's our noun clause, and then the rest of our sentence. So I'm going to do decision. The appositives go in parentheses to show that it's not an integral part of the sentence. So it follows the noun, whether that noun is in the subject place, in the object place, a subjective complement, wherever. You're going to have the appositive in parentheses following that noun. You're going to diagram it. So what is the subject? To have is the infinitive verb. And then we have the prepositional phrase here. And then I go back to my main part of the sentence and diagram my verb, my adjective, and my modifiers down below. I hope that helps. Try and keep the simplified sentence patterns in mind as you do this, and that will hopefully help you kind of distill everything down to its essence and identify sentence patterns, and then you can regain your expanded view and diagram all of the more minor details. I know I say this all the time, but I mean it. If you don't understand this, you're still having questions, still struggling with how to diagram or how to identify or any of this, please let me know. Show it to my office hour. Do whatever you need to do so you can understand and feel comfortable doing this throughout the rest of the semester.